There are some allegations that are going around talking about that Tim Pool can potentially be a Russian asset. And man, it is not looking good for Tim Pool. As a matter of fact, it's many more commentators such as Dave Rubin, Lauren Chan, I think, Lauren Southern. I mean, there's a ton of commentators that are being indicted currently, and it is not looking good at all. And honestly, man, all I can say is watch your content creators responsibly. This is why I stress to you guys to watch your content creators responsibly, because right now these guys are being accused or are being alleged to be Russian assets, which means that they're spreading Russian propaganda and they're attempting to create some sort of cognitive dissonance, or maybe even attempt to skew the perspective that Ukraine is not an ally of the US, but rather an enemy. Like this interesting video from Tim Pool.
But I don't know that it matters anymore. This is psychotic. Ukraine is the enemy of this country. Ukraine is our enemy, being funded by the Democrats. I will stress this again. One of the greatest enemies of our nation right now is Ukraine.
First off, Tim, what in the hell was that banging on that table? He went,
Ukraine is the enemy of this country.
When I saw that, when I heard that, I was just like, oh my gosh. Almost every news article indicates that Russia was the catalyst for this war between Ukraine and Russia. And here we have Tim Pool talking about that they're the enemy of our nation. I mean, there's even a treaty, NATO, that protects nations from Russia. And you're calling Ukraine the enemy? You literally live in this sphere. Now, I do want to go ahead and mention that these are just allegations, right? They have been indicted, but the thing is that they haven't been charged. We shouldn't jump to conclusions, obviously, right? But I'm not here trying to accuse Tim Pool of being a Russian asset at all, okay? But I am contesting what he's saying in that video, because clearly there's a video. You just witnessed it. Now, I do want to go ahead and talk about Lauren Chen, because it seems like she's the keystone figure in all of this. Her and her husband run a website called Tenet Media, and this website seems to be the Russian propaganda machine. As you can see, there's a couple of commentators, familiar faces like Dave Rubin, Tim Pool. And another hilarious thing about this is that if you take a look at this image, they all have like this stoic game face, as if like these guys are like the most serious members of the political sphere. And believe it or not, the president of this website is none other than Lauren Chan's husband, Liam Donovan. And if you read below the name, you can see that it reads President at Watch Tenet Now. Yeah, so currently the feds are going after these commentators and are alleging that they are Russian assets, which is going to be pretty interesting to see the development of this case, because if they are, that has potential consequences, very big consequences. You may not think that these consequences are significant, but believe it or not, this definitely sways opinions, because you, being a citizen of the US, your decision and who you elect in office, it definitely matters, because they are the ones who are going to be making the decisions around the world. They represent the US. And if you guys are digesting this propaganda, guess what? You guys are going to elect leaders that are going to potentially pull out all aid from Ukraine, which is going to make it so much more difficult for Ukraine to battle against Russia. And if you're one of those people that says, oh, well, you know, this is between Russia and Ukraine, the US should not be taking a part of this conflict in any way. These are between two countries and their history. The US has nothing to do with this. Oh, really? All right, well then allow me to enlighten you and educate you, because it's so unbelievably obvious that Tim Pool drastically failed to educate you guys. You know, this war between Russia and Ukraine would have never happened if it wasn't for us, Great Britain, and Russia itself. If you're wondering, what are you talking about, Sonic? Like, you know, how are we involved? Well, as you guys know, the USSR collapsed in 1991, which meant that Ukraine, which was a part of the USSR at the time, was able to gain its independence. Now, with that came with another asset, nuclear weapons, because apparently Russia had some nuclear weapons stored in Ukraine at that time, and so it was able to have some of that nuclear arsenal. Now, during that time, Russia, Great Britain, and of course yours truly, the USSR, the US, pressured them to give them up. And that was because they want a peaceful world. Obviously, more countries having nuclear arms would mean that there could potentially be a disaster in the future. So of course, they wanted not only Ukraine, but Kazakhstan and Belarus to give them up, which they did. They gave him up. And this was known as the Budapest Memorandum. And just to show you what this memorandum is about, it reads, Memorandum on Security Assurances in connection with Ukraine's accession to the Treaty of the Non-Proliferation of Nuclear Weapons, Budapest, 5th of December, 1994. And you can see that there's a welcoming party for Ukraine here, welcoming the accession of Ukraine to the Treaty of the Non-Proliferation of Nuclear Weapons as a non-nuclear weapon state. And it further reads, taking into account the commitment of Ukraine to eliminate all nuclear weapons from its territory within a specified period of time. However, this is perhaps the most interesting segment of this treaty. It reads, the Russian Federation, the United Kingdom of Great Britain and Northern Ireland, and the United States of America reaffirmed their commitment to seek immediate United Nations Security Council action to provide assistance to Ukraine as a non-nuclear weapon state party to the Treaty on the Non-Proliferation of Nuclear Weapons if Ukraine should be a victim of an act of aggression or an object of a threat of aggression in which nuclear weapons are used. I want to go ahead and re-emphasize this sentence just in case it bypassed you. If Ukraine should become a victim of an act of aggression. So in other words, that treaty essentially tells Ukraine, yo homie, we got your back, don't worry about it. And if you're wondering like, well, I never voted for that. Well, the majority of the people who voted for the president during that election time, you know, they voted for the president who agreed to these terms or who helped author this memorandum. That's why it's absolutely important for you to vote, you know, and that's why people like Russia, who potentially wants to develop Russian assets, influencers here in the US, that's the reason why they want to spread the propaganda, because they know that your vote definitely matters. And it's also important that we honor our word. You know, we said, yo, Ukraine, we got your back. Don't worry. We got to have their backs, you know, because we made a treaty. Of course, Russia ended up breaching that treaty, but we didn't. And also, what kind of example does that set from us? You know, imagine we go back on our word, we don't aid Ukraine, and then the rest of the world just looks at it like, oh shoot, you know, like what about NATO? You know, is the US really going to back us up if Russia attempts to invade us or commits an act of aggression? It's something to think about, because if not, then they're probably going to make negotiations with Russia, and then of course Russia is going to have the upper hand because obviously it's a superpower, it has nuclear arms. Of course it's going to have the advantage in that negotiation. So that's why it's absolutely important that you guys be responsible with your content creators, because when you guys watch these guys, you guys are definitely influenced by Tim Pool, by Lauren Chan, by Lauren Southern. You guys are influenced by these people, whether you guys want to know it or not, man. I know that you guys like to think that you guys have some sort of free will and that you guys are the ones that make the educated decisions, but at the end, influencers are called influencers for a reason. They influence people, and unless you're unbelievably aware of all of that, or the biases or the heuristics or any of that, then you're pretty vulnerable to that psychological phenomenon. And I know that some people, or maybe even few people, are especially vulnerable to it. And the reason why I know is because yesterday or 2 days ago, I released a video about Trump. Now, I thought it was constructive criticism, and I did not say anything about him being a Nazi or a racist, because that's not what I think about Trump. I do think that he does fabricate a lot of situations, but I didn't call him a racist or any of that stuff. Nor did I promote Kamala Harris in any way. As a matter of fact, I criticized Kamala Harris in that video, as well as Trump. And this person ended up unsubscribing. Now, I'm not hurt because he unsubscribed, but it made me realize that there's probably a high chance that this person unsubscribed because I was not confirming their bias. And it also made me realize that some people, or maybe even few, cannot recognize the difference between constructive criticism and propaganda. And always pay attention to the content creator and make sure to fact check them. Like, for instance, the guy Benny Johnson, who is also a part of the Tenet Media crew. Today, he ended up making a post on Twitter talking about that Trump was leading in the polls, according to 538, Nate Silvers. But when you fact check him, it's completely false. I don't even know where he got that graph from. You go to his website, you go to the 538 website, and you try to reproduce that same graph, you can't. I don't know where he got that graph from, but one thing's for sure. That graph did not come from 538. And people on Twitter are recognizing that this guy's a fraud. That he's a paid Russian shill. So I kind of just want to go ahead and make you guys aware of that, because I know that there's people out there that like to say, oh, well, you know, my vote doesn't matter. No, it absolutely does matter. That's why there's people out there that pay influencers to spread their bullshit or propaganda. Your vote matters, man. And don't forget that, because when you give your attention to people like this and they're just spreading disinformation, not misinformation, disinformation, they can potentially influence you to make a decision that could potentially be costly for many nations, including the US. So yeah, guys, I just kind of want to just go ahead and let you guys know of that, notify you guys. And yeah, man, that's all I have for you guys. And yeah, hopefully you guys learned something today.